There's always that moment where you've got to jump, you've got to do the thing, you've got to actually take that step. But I think a lot of people who end up on this side of the mic or coaching or in these kind of roles have gone through a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of know the power of those little tiny mindset shifts.
Hello, it's Zoe, coach, creator and mischief maker behind the Mischief Movement podcast, your weekly inspo for people looking for more hell yeah in their life. I'm on a mission to help you rediscover that rebellious streak, find your confident inner badass and stop holding yourself back from the amazing life you've been dreaming of. Join me each week as I discuss mindset, share stories, or develop strategies, sometimes alone, but most often through interviewing adventurous, unconventional guests who are shaking up the status quo, living life on their terms, and impacting the world by doing things differently. All this so I can help you, my amazing renegade listener, to experience the freedom, adventure, and meaningful connections I know you've been craving. Not long ago, I woke up one day and thought this isn't the life I'd imagined for myself. I felt disconnected and unfulfilled, but I set my intention firmly on adding more fun, getting out of my comfort zone and becoming curious about what truly lit me up. And then magical things started to happen, including this podcast. As that famous quote goes, she remembered who she was and the game changed. I've always loved the word mischief because it's cheeky, playful, and a little bit rebellious. And that's exactly what I hope this podcast brings to the table. An audio ass kick out of midlife mediocrity towards fun and positive impact via playful disruption. Let's rewrite the rules, throw two fingers up to society, and do more of the things we love. So I'm here to empower you to boldly rebel against the ordinary and support you as you design a life you don't want to escape from. If you feel called to activate your own adventure and make unconventional your new normal, I dare you to jump in with me. Ready? Let's go. It's so good to be back after a slightly longer break than I'd intended. So welcome to season 4, where we'll be diving deeper into creating a life that's mischievous and meaningful by being more adventurous, more unconventional, and more badass. This January, I'm celebrating a whole year of podcasting. So since my friend Alex Pett, a resilience coach and fellow podcaster, had offered to interview me, I decided it would be a great moment to accept and celebrate this milestone with a slightly different episode. If you're new to the podcast, you'll find out exactly how and why it began. If you've been listening for some time, I hope you'll see that confidence comes with taking action. And if you have a dream you are too scared to pursue, I want you to know that it is possible. Hit subscribe or follow wherever you download your podcasts, and each week I'll prove to you that we can all achieve a life created on our terms. Now, without further ado, over to Alex.
So Zoe, welcome to your podcast.
Thank you. It does feel a bit weird being on the other side, but yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of challenging, isn't it, to suddenly have to be on the other side of the questions.
I know, you have to just watch that I'm not, going to turn the tables and start quizzing you.
Battle of the podcast hosts.
Yeah, it will be. Like I said, it'll be a podcast mashup at this rate.
So you've always asked people at the start of your podcast, what is your mischief? So let's just begin by throwing that back to you.
I thought you might do that. What is my mischief? I suppose what I've come to realise is I like to get people thinking differently. I really love people questioning things and seeing things from a different point of view. And I think recently I've realised that sort of streak in me has been there since my days as a footwear designer. And it was always about, trying to come up with something that was different and wasn't just run of the mill. That was my worst nightmare as a designer, was here's a design from this store. We want our version. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, where's the creativity in that? But yeah, I always love this idea of doing things differently. If there's like a standard way and a really off the wall way, I love doing it the off the wall way, which sometimes makes life much more complicated. But also makes it a bit more interesting and fun.
So what you talked about the shoe design there, but what was your most mischievous shoe design?
I don't know really. I mean, one of the hardest things about being a designer that's not at the top of the kind of couture market, if you like, is everything you're doing has got to be kind of toned down. So you might start off with something really wacky, but you've always got to bear the end consumer in mind. And so, it gets stripped right back until you can find like one tiny element, one tiny detail on the shoe. And you're like, oh, that orange eyelet. Yeah, I did that. It's not nearly as exciting as perhaps what the design looked like 10 designs back, if that makes sense.
Because I was thinking of, was it McQueen or, the really like ridiculously high kind of ballet shoe?
Yes.
Or the ones with like snow globes in the heel. Or
Yeah.
I was thinking,
well, I did when I was a lot younger. I used to love the irregular choice shoes because they were just so off the wall. But I never got a job with them, so unfortunately, my designs were a lot more toned down.
Well, maybe there'll be an opportunity in future arising from this podcast. If anyone's listening. What made you start a podcast?
Do you know what? It's been one of those things that was playing on my mind for so many years, and I think the idea came because I enjoyed listening to podcasts so much. The very first podcast I ever listened to was probably in around 2008, 2009. And I had this dream to move to Italy, and I somehow found this free podcast about learning Italian. And that's how that was my first taste of understanding what a podcast was. I got access to all this kind of free information and was learning a language, and I was recording the episodes to listen to on CD in my car on my commute to work. And I remember thinking, it's so cool that you can actually just do this. I think I picked it up because, it served a purpose. I'd found it accidentally. And then I was at home as a new mom with a baby. I saw something on social media from Carrie Green, who wrote She Means Business. And she was advertising her podcast. And it was it was to do with starting your own online business, but it was an awful lot of like mindset stuff and self-development. And I downloaded a few episodes and I loved it. I just found that podcasts could fit into my life so easily when I was out walking, when I was hanging out the washing, when I was doing all the boring stuff. Suddenly it wasn't that boring anymore. It was like, oh, give me the boring task because I can put a podcast on and I can learn something at the same time. I'm quite nerdy. I love any way of just like learning and stuff. I just enjoyed it so much that I started thinking, wouldn't it be so cool to have my own podcast? But two major things blocked me for a really long time. One was the confidence piece. It was the classic case of, it's not going to be perfect. Can I cope with that? Can I put something out that's not going to be that good? What will people think? Is anybody going to listen? But the other major thing was, I'm just not quite sure what I want to talk about. And I was brainstorming all these ideas until finally, once I'd made the decision to stop looking for my purpose and getting frustrated and just treat life like it's a game and put fun at the top of the agenda, suddenly it was all clear. And I was like, that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how to actually take your life that maybe feels a little bit mundane and add the fun back in and make it interesting and enjoyable and bring the joy back. And from that point, I haven't really looked back because I managed to just use that to drive me forward, even past the kind of, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this. Oh, who's going to listen? You know what? It doesn't matter because I know what I'm going to talk about. Somebody will listen, even if it's my mum. Somebody will listen.
I think that's really cool because shifting the emphasis off the judgments of others and onto the fact that you are passionate about this really matters to you.
Yes.
And I feel like that can overcome the inner critic, it can overcome self-doubt, it can literally overcome anything if you know what you're passionate about.
Exactly. And actually, I haven't introduced you properly, but you know exactly what you're talking about, Alex, because you coach on exactly these kind of topics, don't you?
I do. And I also have lived a lot of this too. Like we've
Really?
talked about my inner critic, haven't we? And
I told you I'm coming for her, that inner critic of yours.
But no, like you said that you didn't know what to do and you were worried about the reception. Obviously, your podcast gets a great reception now and you're really prolific as well. So it's interesting that you've completely overcome that just by doing.
It's a hard thing, isn't it? Yeah, so often you hear that, just start. I know how many times I heard people saying that, not just about podcasting, but different things. And I say it myself, just start, just get going. It's really easy to say, it's really hard to do.
It is. A lot of the work that I do with people is on the stage that comes before it, which is working with your nervous system. Because the thing that's stopping you is usually either your nervous system or an anxiety narrative. So you can do the things that help you to get out of that place where you feel stuck and like you're up against something.
Yeah.
So then when you do say just start, you can be like, oh, I've got just enough freedom from my fear to take one tiny step in the right direction, which you did. And then it snowballs, which is wonderful.
I got sick of my own voice. I literally got sick of, sometimes you can kind of talk things into reality. Like the more you start talking about it and you don't feel like you have to hide your idea or your goal, it helps to kind of birth the thing, because the more people you're telling, the more you're starting to believe that it's going to happen. And I was telling people and I was telling people and I was still telling people, and they were like, great, so when's it going to happen? And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, it will. It's just, and then one day I was like, this is ridiculous. I am so sick of doing all the talking. And then I spoke to a friend of mine, Claire Alexander, and she was like, do you know what, so you just got to start it. I will be your first guest, get it up and running, book some stuff in the diary. And I was like, do you know what? I think it's about time, isn't it? I'm boring myself now. So such a boring narrative. One day I'm going to start a podcast. Yeah, yawn.
You are a year in.
Yes. So actually, I've asked you about doing this episode because I'm actually celebrating a whole year. I can't believe it. I've had a few little breaks during holidays and stuff like that. But yeah, there's like 36 episodes out there now in the world, which is incredible. I almost can't believe that they came from me.
It's very impressive.
Thank you.
It's more than I've done, and I've been doing it 3 years.
What's it they say though? Quality over quantity. So,
oh no. So what's been the most challenging thing through doing all of this?
Probably getting started in the first place. Yeah. Yeah, I reckon it was, actually. That's got to be the hardest part, because everything else I just kind of figured out as I had to. But it was starting in the first place. And I think that's the same for so many people. Once you can get over that initial hurdle, then you just have to kind of maintain the momentum, don't you?
I mean, even that can be tricky as well, like, because life happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, I experienced that myself. With the best will in the world, I'm trying to organise podcast interviews around kid bedtimes and kid pickup times and things like that, school holidays, that kind of thing. But yeah, I keep coming back to it and it's all good. The hardest thing was getting started, but the hardest thing now for me would probably be to stop. I've had a bit of a break over Christmas, but that had to happen just logistic wise and all that kind of stuff. But it's just so fun. I love it. I love having these conversations with people. And they're meaningful and people get a lot out of them. Well, at least they tell me they do. So
I'm excited to continue partnering with Polite Club, a brand whose mission is to change the attitude towards vulnerability and to encourage more conversation around it in order to increase real human connection. Connection is one of my core values, as you know, so to bring more people together and help you rebel against staying the same, Polite Club are offering a cheeky 10% discount when you use the code MISCHIEF at the checkout. 50% of the profits from this organic and rebellious brand are used to fund proactive suicide prevention in the form of coaching, support, and awareness raising. So get involved and become a vulnerable with us. For more info on the brand or to buy online, go to politeclub.co.uk or follow on Instagram at politeclubhq. P.S. If you are a small business doing things differently, an independent brand disrupting the status quo, or simply an unconventional, adventurous individual looking to create a positive impact, I'd love to hear from you about getting your story out there in the world and promoting you. DM me on Instagram at The Mischief Movement. Right, now on with the show.
So here's a question. Who would you love to interview on this podcast, alive or dead?
Easy. Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters.
Who is alive?
Yes.
I didn't know that. I've met him,
What? You haven't?
Yeah.
You haven't?
Yeah.
It's lies. Have you really?
My ex used to be a manager in the music business.
What?
Did I never tell you?
Unbelievable.
He's not a very nice ex, so I don't tend to mention him, but we were walking through Hampstead Heath one day and Dave Grohl was just sitting on the grass and he was like, all right, mate, he's had a little chat and he looked away and he's like, nicest man in, I think he said pop or rock. So, so when I say met, I stood there and went, hi. Like,
you still spoke to him?
I've been in the vicinity of a hug. I would have gone for one. I think he'd have been all right with it. But
oh my God, I'd have literally bowled him right over and it would have been so embarrassing.
Must be used to it.
I don't think I'd have been able to restrain myself. I just literally would have thrown myself and been like, oh my God, you're my absolute hero.
How would you interview him then?
Exactly, I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I'd be able to. I'd be fangirling too much. I'd just sit there laughing and he'd be like, you're going to ask me a question or you're just going to sit there and laugh and be embarrassed. Yeah, that's who I would love to interview, but I'd probably have to do some serious, training.
Maybe this can be the goal for the last ever episode. That can be the pinnacle because, you
End
should
on a high.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. I don't know about anybody else though. For me, he's the obvious because anyone who knows me will be like, oh, she's going to say Dave Grohl. Yeah, it would be. Do you know why, though? What you were saying about being the nicest man in rock. He's nice, but he's cheeky. He's got that mischievous side that I find really, really attractive in a person. It's that kind of, I know my own mind. I'm going to make my own choices. And it's probably going to be in a cheeky and fun way. And I just find that really attractive in people because it's just, I don't know, it's stronger than me. I don't know where that comes from. But anything that's like that, whether it's a person or a brand or a product, that's just that sense of self-assuredness and cheekiness, I just think, oh, you're talking my language.
Is that the language of mischief?
Yeah, I think that is. Yeah.
That's why you started the podcast, that vibe.
It's that vibe. It's playful, but it's also being self-assured. It's also, I want to live life on my terms. Why can't that also be fun? My life was very serious because it was just, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what my purpose is. I've got 2 kids. I haven't got a career. What am I doing with my life? All adult responsibilities. I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of this. Hang on. Where's the fun gone? And once I started looking to bring that back and really tap into my playful side a bit more and stop being so serious. I think it was the whole entering motherhood was really like, oh, you're a mother now and you should be really responsible, and sleep routines and weaning schedules and blah, 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 boring. I was like, hang on, this isn't who I am, really. I mean, it is, but it also isn't.
You could be both, right?
It's readdressing the balance. I think it swung too far one way, I'm not saying you shouldn't be a responsible parent, but it had gone too far. I'd become too wrapped up in being responsible, and I'd kind of lost that sense of fun, I think. And what I like to do with this sort of idea of mischief is say, actually, what I really want on a purely selfish level, but if it helps somebody else, then brilliant, is I want to live a life on my terms and I want it to be fun.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to make a positive impact. And that way I feel like I've covered everything that matters to me.
I think that's really important. I was reading the other day about how like authenticity is a core need of being human. I think we forget that. Like we kind of get really obsessed with status or money or, relationships but actually being yourself is really important. And that's actually one of the top 5 regrets of the dying, apparently, is that,
really,
regretting not having lived your life your way rather than how other people thought you should live it.
Yeah.
So what would you say that your listeners need to know about you that they don't know already?
That's a good question. That is a good question.
Is this a big secret? Like, is it something you don't really want to share?
No, I don't think I've got any skeletons in the cupboard. Not really. I'm just trying to think what they might want to know that I haven't already said. I feel like I've been pretty open about who I am, where I've come from, where I'm trying to get to. Okay, here's the angle. The thing that I would like people to know is that I live in Italy and it was a dream that I had. And actually, somehow, I actually did make it happen. And I still don't 100% know how it happened because it's like one of the most awesome manifesting stories you've ever heard. Like it's so random. And I did talk about this a little bit on the episode with Ollie Dunn. But I think in the context of having a dream and going for it and taking the action and taking those tiny little steps towards getting it, I actually want everybody to know that I live in Italy because I dreamed that one day I would live in Italy.
The podcast kind of, about Italy, learning Italian, listen to that in your car, and now you're in Italy. Like it's kind of a podcast have led you here. So obviously we connected through your podcast.
I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, me too. And I would imagine that you have made lots of other connections and lots of other things have come from this. So what's been the most surprising?
Well, nobody's given me a speaking gig yet, so I'm still available if anybody wants to. But the most surprising thing of all was when a friend of mine said that Max McMurdo was willing to be interviewed on my podcast. And I found that really surreal. Just because he's somebody that people recognise from having been on TV.
How did it go?
It went really well because I feel like the things he talked about were so aligned with this idea of mischief. And basically, I mean, he even said it. For him, it's about designing a job around a lifestyle. And I was like, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And the thing that I took away from that episode more than anything else was it's so possible. It's so possible. And he gave me all these different examples of where he could have gone down one path, but he didn't. And he was kind of hell-bent on, I'm going to design my life around the things that I really enjoy. And having somebody sit there in front of you and saying it is totally possible just meant everything to me because it kind of validated the message that I was trying to put out there. For the first time, I felt like I was talking to somebody who has not only done it, but has done it in a very public way. And I just felt so seen and understood. And I was like, oh, I'm not quite there yet. You're kind of ahead of me, but that's exactly where I'm aiming at. And it's so nice that the listeners can understand that.
So what is the vision for the podcast? What is your plan for 2024, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10?
Ooh. So I think the vision is I'm going to keep going with it because it's fun. I'm just going to see how many interesting people I can connect with over the next year and beyond, hopefully. And I really wanted to keep inspiring people, not just about what's possible, but actually kick their ass into action as well. I don't want it to be an inspirational podcast that gets people talking for a second and then going back to their job that they absolutely hate. I actually really want them to mull it over a lot, talk about the things that they've heard and take some action, because that's the important thing. And as we've already said, that can be the hardest step, but once you make that decision, So podcast, it's just got to keep going. And do you know what I'd like to do on the podcast in the future is also maybe do some actual coaching calls and turn them into podcast episodes. Would be quite fun.
So speaking of action, when are you going to join me for a cold swim?
I wondered if you get that in there. Right. Well, it's happening in the summer, isn't it? Because January just freaked me out.
It will not be cold. It will not be cold in the summer.
Come on, it will be.
We put this on your podcast, accountability.
Fine. Do it. In fact, why don't we just put it out there that we are going to be doing a cold water swim on a particular day in probably end of July, beginning of August, something like that. That's probably when I'll be back. And anybody who fancies coming along, send us a DM. We'll decide a date. What do you reckon?
Funny, I'm up for it. I went this morning, so I'm well up for it.
I know, you don't need convincing, it's me.
No, I'm we'll just get in the entire time, whether it's snowing or not.
Oh, God.
You would love it, honestly.
I mean, the mindset there, though. What is the mindset? What are you thinking? As you're like getting ready and you take your dry robe off, whatever, and you're going towards the water, are you thinking, come on, you've done this loads of times, it's going to be fine, it's absolutely fine? Or are you freaking out going, oh my God, it's going to be so cold?
And usually it's kind of just like, la, 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 la. Like you don't want to hear what's going on in your head. Because it's, there's always that moment where you've got to jump, you've got to do the thing, you've got to actually take that step. And sometimes I find that if I'm not completely consciously engaged in that moment, it's quite a good thing. Because then when I'm actually in the water, I'm like, oh, it's fine. Or like, I'll focus on setting up my phone to take a video so that I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. Or I'm usually with someone as well. And if you're with someone, it's either my friend Tallulah, who will rush straight in, and she's so brave. And I'm just like, well, I can't hang, I'm a resilience coach. I can't stand on the edge going, oh my God. Or it's somebody who isn't as experienced as me, and then I need to set an example. So there's no getting out of it either way. Yeah.
That's good then.
It is a wonderful thing to do, though. I hope we do get to do that swim.
Yeah. Do you know, it's one of those things where I know I would love it because it freaks me out. And most of my life, I've done the things that I don't want to do because I get such a kick out of the satisfaction of having done them afterwards. And I just feel like that's going to be another one to add to the list.
It's proper edge of your comfort zone stuff.
Exactly.
Even like I've been doing it for 4 years, and this morning my brain was like, or my mind was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You could die.
Does it get easier though? Does it get easier?
That's kind of the point, because actually every time you have to go through that, you remind yourself that that fearful little voice is lying. And actually you get in the water, you're like, oh, I'm in the water and I'm still alive. And actually, wow, I feel really, really good. This is amazing. Look at the sunrise. And then you get out and you feel even better, unless you stay in too long, which you should never do. And it really sets you up for the day. And if you've got any aches and pains, any inflammation, it's all gone. Wow. I'm obviously a massive advocate for it. So I think but physically and mentally, it's just one of the best things that you can do.
Then it has to happen, and it will happen. It will happen. You're saying it won't be cold, but if you are someone like me who hasn't been swimming in cold water, it will feel cold.
Okay, well, maybe we can get an ice bath as well, just to make sure you get a full experience. Well, congratulations on a year of podcasting, and thank you for letting me interview you. This is
thank you. It's been super fun. P.S. We'll have to get you back on again soon.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to, anytime.
Brilliant.
Maybe you can interview me in the water.
Stop it with the water, right?
Relentless.
Well, I hope you loved today's episode and it made you think differently, or perhaps nudged you into changing something in your life that's not working for you. I'd love to give you a shout out right here on the podcast too, so let me know what you think, what you'd like to hear more of, or how you've been inspired to take bold action. Let's keep in touch over on Instagram at The Mischief Movement, or click the link in the show notes to sign up to my Mischief Mail newsletter, where you'll get exclusive insights on upcoming episodes and your chance to submit questions to future guests. But shh, don't tell anyone, it's our secret. Please keep spreading the word about the podcast. You're doing such an amazing job, and I'm also super grateful for your 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, which seriously help my mission to inspire and empower more people like us to choose mischief over mediocre. Have a great week and keep making mischief. Ciao.